Hi, today we'll be looking at some free horror games. So, let's just go see the first game. The Children of Clay is a free horror game made by Messier, where you play as an archaeologist who found a strange artifact in the Ural Mountains. Right away, the art style is very interesting. I don't believe that it's an FMV game, but it does have that look. It kinda has that uncanny quality that Growing My Grandpa had, a game which I actually made a video about a while ago. The artifact looks extremely ancient, like something out of Mesopotamia. Examining the back of it, we see a little bit of metal. We search for iron in our books and find that the earliest known ironwork can be dated back to 3500 BC, so we might be looking at a nearly 5,000-year-old human-made object. The entry also says, "Cold iron as a long and varied tradition in the mythology and folklore of the world." This, as far as I can tell, is completely true. In many traditions, cold iron was believed to repel malevolent supernatural entities. Even today, in extremely rural areas of the Western world, you might see an iron horseshoe nailed to a door, for example, or an iron fence surrounding a cemetery to keep the souls of the dead in their rightful place. Using the magnifying glass up top, we get to more closely inspect the artifact, and we find these strange runes on its side. Searching through our books again, we find that they are part of the Old Hungarian alphabet. Before that geographic area was Christianized and adopted the Latin alphabet. The Old Hungarian script's origin seems to be as mysterious as the Hungarian people themselves. It seems to have originated from Turkic script, but takes influence from Old Uralic of northeastern Europe, and even some Greek contributions can also be found. Since Hungarian script is written from right to left, the markings on the artifact spell Urdug, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Searching through our books, we find that Urdug is a shape-shifting demon with a massive cock. This is true, by the way, you can look this up. From old pagan Hungarian mythology. After the arrival of Christianity, Urdug was identified with the commonly known Christian devil. I think it's important to mention that there is evidence of Old Hungarian script being used by rural people all the way up to medieval times. So there's a possibility that the markings were made much later in order to warn any who come across it. Also, the image they used on this entry is actually an Arabic rendition of the devil, or the ibis, and they just sort of smudged the face, presumably because the original face was a little silly. After learning about what is possibly inside the artifact, it begins to secrete this black liquid, and there's a lot of it particularly coming out from the iron at the back. Just a few months after the disappearance of the esteemed archaeologist and the incident involving a broken artifact, the team working on the remote site in the Urals has made an astonishing discovery. A previously unknown underground chamber containing a dozen similar small clay figures has been discovered. They are already in contact with several universities across the globe to further study them. Whatever malevolent entity was in that artifact is now going to spread worldwide. I thought this was a really cool idea, to investigate this artifact, to sort of build up its ominous lore, all while you're directly confronted by it at all times. There's really no escape from it, it's always the main focal point, and the atmosphere was really good as well. The dramatic lighting on the artifact, the droning music, it all added to the dive into this mysterious rabbit hole. Although I do wish that the rabbit hole went much deeper, even if it meant the creator making some things up, leaving it to be just loosely based on real folklore. I just think the tension could have been built up much higher. But it is very good for what it is. I also don't really know what sort of time constraints the creator had, as this was a submission to something called Hocktober Horrors, which I assume is some sort of Hocktuian event, which I respect obviously. This is a Hocktua friendly channel, and I do like to have a Hocktuian perspective on things, and I always look at games through a Hocktuian lens, like what things mean in a true Hocktuian sense. What are the Hocktuian consequences? Morningtide is a little free horror experience I found on Itch.io, made by Karolina Kuberova, which is how you say that correctly. where you play as a guilt-ridden fisherman. The game has that PS1 polygonal, shaky style, which, I'll be honest, is a little overused in horror games, but I do understand that it allows small developers to get their ideas out there in a realistic time frame, and overall, I think it was well executed here. The fishing mechanic is pretty simple. You basically just need to keep the fish in this circle area. When he's in it, your fishing progress bar goes up. When he's out of it, it goes down. The first fish we catch is just a normal little anchovy. The second fish also looks normal, but upon closer inspection, it seems to have a human eye, which is a little unsettling. And the third fish makes this croaking sound. When you hang him up, you notice that it has a fully human face. Same with the fourth fish. You catch more of them when you start to notice the water turning to blood and the sky becoming orange, as if we're in the middle of a large forest fire, when suddenly it begins to rain blood. Then we see a massive one floating in the ocean. After 3 actual minutes of trying to catch it, it's a crying woman. And then we get the last fish. The sea whispers secrets, tales untold, of a man undone by jealousy's plight. In mourning I sail, my guilt takes hold, a tragic tale of love turned to blight. A wife unfaithful, or so I believed, in shadows of doubt my love I deceived. Now sailing the path where mourning does tread, for a son lost to jealousy's dread. So the fisherman believed his wife was unfaithful, but now seems to realize he was wrong. We can assume he took her life and threw her body into the ocean, possibly alongside what he thought was her lover and their unborn child. Let's go over the different fish we catch and see what they could possibly mean. First, the fish with the human eye. I think this one could represent the watchful eye of judgment, both from the fisherman himself and maybe an external moral force, especially if he's a religious man. The eye might signify his conscience, looking back at him and forcing him to confront his own guilt over the jealousy that destroyed his life. Then we have the croaking stingray. I believe this is meant to be the fisherman himself. If we think about where a stingray resides, it's at the very dark, murky bottom of the sea. This might represent the fisherman fishing out his own subconscious, and we find that his subconscious is in deep pain. We then have the fish with the human face. I think this one could possibly represent the wife's lover, or who the fisherman believed to be her lover. I say this because it's quite neutral, as if he's an uninvolved third party, and it's as if the fisherman can project anything onto him, as he was probably someone he didn't even know. After that, we have this toothy fish. This one's a little more difficult to interpret, but I think it could represent the fisherman's want for some rightful punishment. The guilt is so immense, perhaps some form of punishment would subdue it and put his consciousness at ease. The last two are quite obvious. He murdered his wife and she was most likely pregnant with his son. It's about as direct as you can get. Overall, I thought that was very good. As a short, free horror experience, it was very effective. Although, similarly to The Children of Clay, I do wish it took its time a little bit more, because you catch these fish one after the other. I think the game could benefit from a wider array of normal fish, and some with more subtle malformities of some kind, so that it forces you to pay more attention, and then when the game wants to shock you with just straight up a guy's face, it'll be more effective, I think. Anyway, it was very good though, and I liked the poem at the end. Alright, you got me. This isn't really a horror game, but it is kind of surreal and dystopian. And if we're gonna consider liminal spaces as part of the overall horror genre, then I think BABBDI can be in there as well. BABBDI is an atmospheric exploration game made by Lemaitre Bros. You explore the foggy, lonely, brutalist landscape of the town of BABBDI in order to escape it, and in order to escape, you must find a train ticket and leave on the train. The landscape is imposing, grey and unkind. All buildings bleed together to create a mass of brutalist concrete, which surrounds you and towers over you. The people of BABBDI, however, are not unkind in their nature, but are certainly gloomy, most likely due to the circumstances they find themselves in. and I think it's implied that this environment itself is killing them. At the beginning, we meet a man called Asker and his sick wife, Griselda, and they actually have tickets to leave this place. They have to leave. His wife is sick after all, and she's not getting any help here. After our adventure to the ticket office, we find out from this big face guy that they're not selling tickets anymore. They do have a bike though, so that's something. The man that was next to the elevator tells us that Asker's wife has died and that maybe we can have her ticket. He gives us a corpse finder so that we can instantly lock into her corpse, which is a very grim idea for a gadget. Passing by the apartments, we see a giant swarm of flies surround the balcony, as if she has been dead for many, many years. Although the game may have an amateurish look, with overly stretched textures and rudimentary shapes composing the environment, it's clear that the creators possess a strong sense of artistic direction. This guy, BABBDI, tells us it was too much for her. Now, he could simply be referring to the sickness, but I think he's referring to this oppressive, hostile space they inhabit and want to escape from. It's also incredibly lonely. The brutalist landscape was clearly meant for swarms of people. Looking over at the empty apartments, you get the sense that perhaps there was something here before, something vibrant, a community. But it's gone and won't be attained again. Or it never existed, so it lives in the realm of what if. Worse even, perhaps it was always fated to be empty. I did a whole video about brutalism some time ago. The video probably sucks now, but whatever. In it, I talk about the utilitarian nature of brutalism, but in BABBDI, it's anything but utilitarian. It's as if the space doesn't want you in it. It makes it as hard as possible for you to traverse it. But that's also where the fun of the game comes from. There's all these fun gadgets for you to use to explore the map, or to speedrun the game. There's some pretty crazy speedruns of this game out there. The game, although humorous at times, builds an image. The old lady who traverses this inhuman space just to get groceries. The lady gathering sewer oil. The AI writing and AI pictures and textures. It's all as if it's trying to mimic the average human experience. Recognizable but still alien. Living in BABBDI is like being in a state of perpetual limbo, where life is neither fully lived nor wholly abandoned. It's as if the BABBDians are stuck in life, as if they are waiting for something to change, or have simply accepted this experience as fact and have resigned themselves to it. It's a pretty interesting game. I think you should go play it. It is free after all. Wrong Floor is a really small horror experience by a Russian creator that goes by N4BA, or maybe he's from Belarus, I'm not sure. He seems to speak Russian is my point. As you probably know, Russians are basically bred from a very young age to be game developers. No matter what game you're playing, you can trust that some Russian kid has modded in his small hometown into the game, so I knew this was going to be good. And it was. Now, from my understanding, this game doesn't really have any story. You're just inside a Brezhnevka. That's those taller commie blocks usually built in the Brezhnev era. You try to use the elevator, but it breaks and takes you into an unexisting floor. And you reach a concrete room with only a small desk lamp as a light source. And this is kind of the strongest part of the game. The way it utilizes darkness. Here you have to shift this headlamp so it points at the place you want to go. And from there you have to stumble around in the darkness until you find some more light. You do eventually get a flashlight, but it's very weak and inconsistent. And one detail in particular that I liked was the fact that when you run, the flashlight points down so that you can't really see where you're going. I thought that was kind of a good trade-off. If you panic, then you can run quite fast, but you won't really know where you're going or what's hiding in that void of darkness. At some point, you find out that you're stuck here with an 8-foot tall man. And he's kind of the antagonist of this very short game. The ambience is very good. For the most part, it will consist of droning, bassy sounds, which fit very well into this basement-esque environment. You can tell though that this is meant to be a sort of demo for a more complete project, most likely the game called From the Darkness, which is in the same setting of the Russian apartment complex, although that one mostly takes place within an actual apartment, and uses the same antagonist, the tall, cut-up, smiling man. I've actually played that game before, and I gotta say, it's definitely worth it. It was genuinely really good, although it's not free, so I won't be talking about it today. Clay-Scape is a horror claymation style puzzle game made by a user named Colorbomb. I've noticed that this has been a popular theme in the horror game genre for a while now, where developers use a sort of cutesy, child-friendly style as a vehicle for whatever the horror is in that particular project. I actually quite like this trend. I think it's especially effective on me because when I was a kid, I did play those old little kid puzzle games. One I remember particularly was Apprendilandia. To be honest, it was a little creepy when the characters would just sort of vacantly stare at you. The puzzles in this game are not as hard as I thought they would be. I'd say they're a healthy challenge, but reading the comments on this game, you'd think you were dealing with some sort of Mensa level fucking mind freak brain twister. I do know of one puzzle which got updated that was, honestly, kinda messed up. After turning on this computer, you would get this website. Then you're supposed to go to this thing, and you were sort of just supposed to know that these arrows were meant to represent north, west, east, south, and a dot, and then input the website domain using this. So it would go west, 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 dot, you know, and you do the rest. Now they've updated it to have the letters on the thing, which makes it more intuitive. Maybe now it's too intuitive? I don't know, I'm kind of a picky bitch, so. The game is very small and there's only a few scary moments. One specific one actually gave me a little jump, to be honest. But this game was quite good and I recommend it, and also thanks for watching. Ha!